We all fear being stranded somewhere far beyond the safety of home. Maybe it's a desolate road, or maybe it's the vast, unforgiving ocean. Wherever it is, that fear of isolation, of something watching, waiting, hiding just out of sight, it's universal. That's exactly where we found ourselves. Mike Dawson, the kind of guy who'd laugh in the face of danger, was telling me about a bad omen old Joe Carter warned him about. We were pushing out to sea on that boat, but the fog, it didn't sit right. Too calm for comfort. Old Joe had said something about the trench, but Mike, he shrugged it off like it was nothing. He always did. We pressed forward, but I couldn't shake the feeling crawling up my spine. Tommy Rivera was at the wheel. He wasn't as tough as Mike, but he tried, playing with the boat's controls like he was a pro. He wanted to impress Mike, but the dude was sweating. "What's that smell?" he asked, glancing at me with wide eyes. It wasn't normal sea air. There was something off. Mike just waved it away. "Salt air," he muttered, but I knew he wasn't buying it either. We hadn't gone far when old Joe appeared back on the dock. "The trench claims who it wants!" he shouted. Tommy looked back at him, fear written all over his face, but Mike slammed the throttle down harder, the roar of the engine drowning out Joe's warning. Typical Mike. Never listened to anyone, always pushing too hard. Then came the water. The blackest water I'd ever seen. Not the deep blue you get used to out here. This was like ink. Pure darkness under the boat. Mike leaned over, staring at it, trying to figure it out, but we kept moving. "Must be deep," he muttered, but I wasn't convinced. Deep or not, there was something down there, something more than water. Tommy started hearing whispers. His knuckles were white on the wheel, and when he told Mike, Mike brushed him off. "Just the wind," he said, but I could see doubt creeping into his eyes. The weight of last season's disaster still hung over him. We needed a good haul this time, or we were screwed. The radar blipped. Just for a second, something huge moved under us. We both stared at the screen, but Mike, always playing it cool, shrugged. "School of fish," he said, but we both knew that wasn't it. Not that big, not out here. The fog thickened, closing in on us like a wall. We couldn't see a damn thing. Tommy was losing it, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping him sane. Mike snapped at him to calm down, but I could feel it in the air. We all knew something was wrong. When we hauled up the first net, it was heavy. But the fish, they weren't normal. Discolored, bloated like they'd been dead for weeks. Tommy recoiled, gagging, but Mikey, he insisted we pack them. "We're not leaving empty-handed," he growled. I don't know what he was trying to prove, but it wasn't worth it. That night, the rumbling started. A low growl from beneath the boat. We both heard it, but Mike tried to play it off again. "Engine," he said, but he didn't believe it. Neither did I. Next morning, deep scratches ran along the hull, like claws raking over the metal. Tommy was terrified, but Mike wouldn't turn back. He was obsessed. His brother, he'd lost him out here. I think he thought if he just kept pushing, kept going, maybe he'd make up for that, prove something. Shadows moved under the water, faster than any fish should. Tommy saw them first, and when he mentioned it, Mike snapped, calling him a coward. But I could see it in his eyes. He was scared too. Tommy had a nightmare that night about the boat sinking. Woke up convinced it was real. Ran to check the hull, and sure enough, the scratches from the night before had turned into leaks. Water was seeping in. Mike patched it, but neither of us slept after that. We saw another boat through the fog, barely visible. As we got closer, it vanished. Tommy kept talking about old Joe's warnings, but Mike shut him down hard. "There's no curse," he said. The denial was almost desperate at this point. The growling came back, louder this time, and something hit the boat hard. It damn near knocked us overboard. Mike was still trying to keep it together, but he was starting to crack. I could see it. Tommy spotted it first. Tentacles. Huge, massive tentacles just beneath the surface. He screamed for Mike, but when Mike ran over, the shadows were gone. Then the engine died. We were adrift, right in the middle of the trench. No power, nothing. Mike tried to restart it, over and over, But it was no use. We were stuck. Panic set in for both of us. We tried the radio, but nothing. No response. And the fog. God, the fog never lifted. Tommy was cracking, babbling about curses and how we needed to turn back. But Mike? He couldn't leave. Not without proving himself. The boat started taking on more water, but he didn't care. We were already too far gone. When something scraped the hull from below again, a long, drawn-out screech, Tommy dropped his tools, shaking. Mike pretended to be calm, but the cracks were showing. He was losing control. Tommy broke down and admitted something then. Last season, he'd frozen during the storm because he'd seen something in the water. Something massive. Mike called him a coward, but I knew better. The truth was, Mike was terrified too. We spotted a second boat drifting near us, the same one we'd seen earlier. Tommy swore we were seeing the same boat over and over again. He was right. We were caught in something we couldn't escape. Tommy lost it, diving into the water. He wanted to see what was under there. He wanted proof, and he got it. Massive tentacles, a creature bigger than anything we could have imagined. Mike pulled him back on board just before one of the tentacles brushed past him. The creature circled us. Tommy figured it out. It wasn't trying to kill us. It was trapping us. Just like old Joe said, the trench didn't claim lives. It kept them. In the end, it didn't matter what we did. We were stuck. The fog lifted just enough for us to see a ghostly boat, our own, but old, rotten, with our dead bodies slumped aboard. The truth hit us then. We'd been dead since the moment we entered the trench. There was no escape. And as the growling returned, louder than ever, we knew one thing for sure. We'd be trapped here, fishing and sinking. Forever. Story 2. The sea never truly lets go. It all started with that damn storm warning. Red was always full of cryptic shit, muttering about the sea taking what's owed. I didn't give it much thought. Who listens to some old lady mumbling at the docks? But Patch, he wasn't so sure. I could see it in his face. The guy had that nervous energy, the type that twists your gut before you even step on the boat. Still, Jake Real Andrews didn't give a damn. Cocky bastard, he laughed in her face, called her a crazy old witch, and cracked open another beer like the storm was just a joke. Typical Jake. Next morning, we're out on Jake's rickety-ass boat. It's creaking like it's about to fall apart under us, but Jake is bragging the whole time. "No storm's gonna beat me," he kept saying. He had to prove he was the best, like always. Patch stayed quiet, but I could see him clutching the side, knuckles white. You'd think he was trying to hold in his lunch, but it was that bad feeling, gnawing at him like it always did. Jake, though, was off. I've seen him fish 1,000 times, but today he was wound up tight, too focused. He stared out at the waves like he was trying to bend them to his will. He cast his line like he was going to tear the sea apart. I noticed it then. Deep red marks on his arms, like he'd been clawed by something. Scratched on the gear. He shrugged it off with that cocky grin. But I saw it. Something was wrong. And then it happened. The boat jolted hard. Too hard. We nearly got thrown overboard, but Jake, he was loving it. We got a big one, Patch. He was grinning ear to ear like he'd just hooked a legend. I screamed at him to cut the line, to let it go, but Jake was too far gone. His pride locked into that reel like his life depended on it. The sea? It was getting angry, waves rising unnaturally like something alive. Patch was screaming for Jake to turn back, but the idiot just cursed at the ocean, daring it to throw more at us. Then he cut the line. But the boat didn't stop. No, something pulled us deeper into the storm. The water under us. Wrong, eerie shapes, faces almost, swirling beneath, reaching up. I've never seen Patch freak out like that. He was practically begging Jake to steer us back, but Jake, he just stared down at the water, lost in it. Those red marks on his arms started glowing. That's when he leaned over the edge like he was answering some invisible call. And then Jake was gone, just like that. He tumbled into the sea, pulled under so fast I barely had time to scream his name. Patch dove in after him, but the ocean, it was freezing, pulling him down with it. That's when he saw them, bloated corpses of fishermen, dead eyes glowing in the darkness, their bodies covered in the same marks as Jake. They grabbed him, pulling him deeper, deeper. Patch barely made it back to the boat, but Jake, gone, swallowed by the sea, taken like he was never even there. I'll never forget the look in Patch's eyes when he climbed back aboard, drenched and shaking. The storm picked up again, like it was furious, like it knew it had lost one but could still claim more. The boat moved on its own, heading back to shore. Patch didn't say a word. He just sat there, staring at the water, knowing something was wrong. When we hit land, Red was there, waiting, her eyes cold and knowing. She didn't need to say much. "The sea always collects its due," she muttered, eyes trailing to Patch's arm. I looked, and sure enough, faint red marks had started to appear on his skin. Days went by, and Patch tried avoiding the docks, the sea, anything that reminded him of that night. But whispers followed him on the wind, and at night he dreamt of bloated corpses, hands dragging him under. He was next, and deep down he knew it. Desperation made him return to Red, demanding answers, but she just shook her head. "You can't outrun the sea," she said. "You're marked. It's only a matter of time." Patch tried leaving, but every road, it led back to the docks, like the sea itself was calling him. He bumped into a couple of dumb fishermen at the bar, cocky idiots like Jake. They laughed in his face when he tried to warn them, dismissing the talk of curses as bullshit. It hit Patch hard, the dread sinking in. He knew what was coming, but they were too dumb to see it. Sure enough, the next day, those fools were out in the ocean, storm brewing, just like before. Patch couldn't stand it. He borrowed a boat, followed them out, knowing he was heading straight back into the nightmare. By the time he reached them, it was already too late. Their boat lurched violently, something massive pulling them under. Patch screamed for them to cut the line, but their terrified screams were all he heard before the ocean swallowed them whole. Patch jumped into the water, trying to save them, but he was no match for the sea. One of the fishermen managed to grab onto his boat, barely alive, but the other, gone, taken, just like Jake. The storm died down as they hit land, calm as ever. But the survivor, he had the marks now, glowing red, cursed just like Jake. Patch ran back to Red, demanding to know how to break this nightmare. She finally told him the truth. The sea only releases those who return willingly, but no one ever survives. Patch knew what he had to do. He couldn't keep running. The sea had marked him, and he had to face it. The next day, he sailed back into the storm, scars glowing on his arms, ready to confront whatever claimed the marked. The sea twisted around him, monstrous waves and howling wind. Out of the chaos, Jake's bloated body rose from the depths, his dead eyes empty, a warning of what could happen. But Patch didn't hesitate. He plunged into the water, sinking deeper into the abyss, surrounded by the ghostly forms of drowned fishermen. Patch realized then the only way to break the curse was to embrace it. He let the water pull him down deeper until he saw Jake again. But this time, Jake was different, almost peaceful. He offered Patch a way out, and when Patch grabbed his hand, he was propelled back to the surface. The storm died instantly, and the scars on Patch's arms began to fade. Back on shore, Red was waiting. "You survived," she said. But Patch knew better. The sea never lets go, not really, and its mark, even faded, was still there. It always would be.